introduction I just told Art that I've ever had. So that's, that's outstanding. I really appreciate that very much. Look, you and I, we want the same exact things. You know, whether it's right here, whether I travel the state, whether I'm in New York or Washington, D.C., when I talk to regular people and not politicians, we want two things. We want people of principle and we want people of courage. And Art and Ruth and each one of you, you exhibit that. Let's give Art a big round of applause. Thank you, Art. Thank you very much. Another person here in the room that exhibits courage and principles in the face of all institutional force over many years is Christine Chalky. And if you do one thing, join her, like her on Facebook, watch what she does as she fights for the people who have real needs in this state, the people with developmental disabilities. Christina Chalky. So people ask me, Adam, what does your organization do? And we basically do, here's a simple description of what we do. We fact-check politicians, especially in Illinois. So this fall, this past spring, the John Stossel program called me and they asked me to fact-check Rahm Emanuel on his promise, his executive order, when he ran for mayor of Chicago in 2011, to end pay-to-play in the city, to end the historic culture of corruption in City Hall in Chicago. And so he said we can do that. We're holding 12 years of line-by-line City of Chicago checkbook transactions. And we mashed up that database with Rahm Emanuel's campaign donors and their disclosed companies. We ran the companies through the City of Chicago checkbook, through Mayor Daley's spending, through Rahm Emanuel's spending, and here's what we found. We found 600 Emanuel donors that were inside the City of Chicago checkbook gave him $7 million of campaign cash. And through the Daley and Emanuel administrations, those 600 vendors received $2 billion worth of city payments. And it said two things. Rahm Emanuel was firmly in command of the corrupt Daley machine.
Mafia.
And it also said that his campaign promise, followed by his executive order in 2011, was a lie. He lied to everybody, and nobody fact-checked him. And that made the second City of Chicago mayor's debate. Unfortunately, there was a socialist running against Rahm Emanuel, Chewy Garcia. We fact-checked Lisa Madigan, and that takes courage in Illinois. Nobody fact-checks Lisa Madigan. But Illinois is so corrupt that we've given handcuffs, subpoena, and indictment power to the Madigan family. She's the state's top cop, the Attorney General. She's got a staff of 900 and cannot find corruption in Illinois anywhere. But in 2002, she promised, when she ran for Attorney General, she sat in front of the Chicago Tribune editorial board, she promised them, and I quote, "I will prosecute public corruption in Illinois, even if it means indicting my father." The corrupt House Speaker, Michael Madigan. So we fact-checked her. We filed a Freedom of Information Act request. And she disclosed 12 public corruption cases. Half of them were for DUI, and she lost half of those. The state has 56,000 state employees. There's 750,000 current public employees in the state. She can't find any law breaking anywhere. So we told her salary spend within the Attorney General's office. And what we found is, it's great to be a friend of Lisa Madigan. Amongst her patronage hires, her friends, 109 special employees received $1 million worth of patronage pay spikes over a 4-year period from the state who has no money. So we took a look at who's inside that 109 employees, and we found Cecilia Bundes. Just one of 109. And who is Cecilia Bundes? From Loyola Law School, she joined Lisa Madigan's staff as an attorney. And she was promoted rather quickly to a supervising attorney, and then allowed to move 2 states away to Dearborn, Michigan, 507 round-trip miles from the office. She has no access to state databases, computers, HR systems, or anything, email systems. We FOIA'd all of that, and they said they had no documents responsible. No way to communicate with the office. We pulled her timesheets. She hasn't even set foot in the office 5 full months out of the last 24 months. We pulled her travel reimbursements. And over a 18-month period, 19 times, she was reimbursed from an in-state travel reimbursement fund to commute from Dearborn, Michigan to Chicago, specifically to her mother's residence. It wasn't in-state travel. You can't reimburse for commuting costs, and all that is probably taxable. And that's how bad it is in Illinois. We didn't even have to move beyond Lisa Madigan's own staff. There are no easy conversations left in Illinois or in America. It takes courage, it takes principle to engage in all of them. And as a movement, we need to stop bending blindly, emotionally. We need to start fighting on hard facts. And our founders recognized this. They recognized that knowledge is power. They wrote it into our founding documents, Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. The founders recognized the power of transparency. Paraphrasing, Article 1, Section 9 says that a periodic reporting of revenues and expenses shall be given to the people on a timely basis. And it's the internet age. It's the age of big data. It's the age of the internet of all things. The electronic age. And we feel the interpretation of Article 1, Section 9 must be every dime online in real time, join the transparency revolution, and open the books. And to that end, we've done something that nobody else in the country's ever done. We've posted online nearly every disclosed dime of federal spending since the year 2000. Out of the states, we've got 48 out of the 50 states with their checkbook. We're working it out with Republican North Carolina right now, and we're going to have to sue California as the holdout. There are 90,000 municipalities across the country in 36,000 separate local units of government. We have at least 1 year of salaries, pensions, and/or vendor spending across the country. We figured the politicians would go crazy if somebody posted every nickel and dollar they've been wasting. And so that's what we did. And we drove it to your cell phone. So 2 years ago, in the Wall Street Journal, my op-ed was published, Track Government Spending on Your Phone. And that's when we pioneered, for the first time ever, you could see all federal spending since the year 2000 in your zip code. Here's what I found in my zip code in Hinsdale. I found $3.64 million went to our local Rolex jeweler. $1.5 million went to the local Lamborghini auto dealer. It was an SBA loan. He defaulted on it and stuck us all with the loan.
Burn this place down.
$1 million, where my daughters take Irish dance and ballet at the Hinsdale Community House, went to on a grant to the community house to enhance the educational experience of the Hinsdale kids on Millionaire Road. And it's wrong. And I advocated in that Wall Street Journal op-ed that nobody, you and I, we can't complain about DC or about Springfield until we have good government where we live. And we need to take a look at the data, take a look at the spending,
Right.
Start asking questions, and hold the political class accountable. And a year went by, and leaders lead. And I realized that I hadn't done that locally. We've been holding people accountable in Springfield, in DC, but in my backyard, where we all have network, where we have relationship, where we have sway and reputation and resources, I hadn't held my local units accountable. So in May of 2014, I chose my local community college, the junior college. It's the second largest college in Illinois. It's called the College of DuPage. And over the course of the next 18 months, we made them famous on a national basis. My first public comment, I advocated 3 things. Freeze property taxes. I noticed they've been going up for 14 straight years. Freeze student tuition. I noticed they've been going up for 14 years. And stop spending on construction because they spent $600 million rebuilding the entire physical plant of the school. Bring those dollars into the classroom. Get back to mission. We showcased the president of the school, Dr. Robert Bruder, making $500,000 a year. Soon after, I unearthed an email strategy from the president, Bruder, to the board of trustees on how they were planning to procure a $20 million state grant through a political strategy on getting Governor Quinn reelected governor. And when we unearthed that email strategy, we stopped that grant. Soon after that, we discovered that for 6 years, while they were saying they were being transparent with every dime, they hid $100 million that the board itself and the public never saw, and only administrators and the chairman of the college knew about the spending. We dug into that $100 million. We found just some easy things. We found $250,000 of wine and wine accessories tagged as instructional supplies. The president went to Botswana, Africa, and slaughtered an African elephant. We found that taxpayers paid for his global satellite phones. We found tens of thousands of dollars spent at a private shooting club, country club, including his dues paid from students, from the scholarship fund, and from taxpayers through this hidden impress style of accounting.
Is this kind of crazy?
On the construction spending, up to $600 million, we looked at what they built, and they built more office space for the executives than classroom space for the students. They built an upscale French restaurant complete with a world-class wine cellar and hired a French sommelier. And then at that restaurant, pushed through the hidden spending account, they opened up house accounts and they acted like Wall Street bankers, where they billed off $300,000 of fine dining, fine drinks, parties, and gifts at the Waterleaf restaurant. Federal subpoenas are flying, state subpoenas are flying, local subpoenas are flying. The treasurer of the school has been fired, the comptroller's been fired, and I'm proud to say last week the president himself, finally after a lengthy and multi-count investigation, he's fired as well.
And no, sir.
The chairman of our organization is a great hero of mine, and maybe of yours too. He's the former United States Senator, retired Dr. Tom Coburn from Oklahoma. And in 2013, he was one of the 100 most influential people in the world, as picked by Time magazine for their list. And Coburn tells the following story about how much courage and principle it's going to take to get America back. You see, you guys have all heard about the bridge to nowhere. Well, as a freshman senator, Coburn discovered the bridge to nowhere. $400 million for a bridge to an island for less than 100 people who lived there. It was in Alaska, wholly owned by the legendary Republican U.S. Senator Ted Stevens. And Ted Stevens wasn't happy that an upstart freshman in the United States Senate, Dr. Coburn, had a resolution on the Senate floor to stop his bridge. And he barreled down the aisle, fists clenched, at Coburn, and he said, "You're a freshman. Get your amendment off of this floor. You're a bad Republican. Republicans, it's our agenda, Coburn. You're getting in the way of our national agenda that'll accomplish real things on behalf of the people of America. You're standing in its way. This is not helpful." And Coburn stood up to him. He wouldn't pull his amendment. And Ted Stevens won that night. He won. The vote was 14-83. But Coburn knew something that Stevens didn't know. He created a debate. And when the people across the country heard of the bridge to nowhere, eventually they stopped that bridge and they stopped earmarks as we know it. So we're running at American Transparency at openthebooks.com. We are running Coburn's model. Our legacy is Coburn's legacy. Deep transparency. With Obama in '06, his legislation opened up the federal checkbook that makes our work possible. Coburn's oversight reports, the Waste Book Report, on an annual basis identified billions of dollars of waste, misallocation of resources. So it's transparency coupled up with accountability. And on a quarterly basis, we issue those reports, those accountability reports. They're open the books oversight reports. And so the first one we did was about 2 years ago. We did farm subsidies in urban areas where there are no farms. I'm from Herscher. I grew up, my work ethic is from the farm. Walking beans, the tasseling corn, baling hay. Let me tell you, in this corrupt state, it was a pleasure to run for governor. That's not hard work. Chicago, we identified, out of 1,200 municipalities in Illinois, Chicago receives the 7th highest farm subsidies. We found that Reverend Minister Louis Farrakhan, the founder of the Nation of Islam, received over $317,000 of federal farm subsidy at his home in Hyde Park in Chicago. Oh, wow. We found tens of millions of dollars of federal farm subsidy between Midtown Manhattan, Washington, D.C., and Chicago. We found the National Audubon Society, the Birdwatchers, the Conservation Group, slaughtering lambs on their lamb farm in Minnesota, and you and I were subsidizing it and they were collecting it. We found the National Audubon Society. They have tobacco farms in New York State collecting tobacco subsidies. You can't make these things up. Our next report was Fortune 100 companies, our best and brightest companies. We studied the federal flow of funds for the first time in our nation's history. We quantified it off, and it was $1.2 trillion. And I wrote the report very neutrally. But Stephen Moore, Wall Street Journal editorial board, chief economist at Heritage, he wrote an editorial in Investor's Business Daily, ranking our report on a national basis. And he wasn't nice. He wasn't neutral. He called the Fortune 100 corporate welfare queens. He took Republicans to task. How can they go up to Capitol Hill armed with legislation to kick poor people off the dole when you're leaving daddy warbucks on the dole? The report then went to David Stockman, Reagan's former budget chief, and Stockman wrote about it twice on his blog, and he said the Gipper would weep if he knew what happened to his war on big government funding big corporations. And then it got interesting. It went to Bill Maher. And Bill Maher agreed with Stephen Moore. Bill Maher agreed with David Stockman. And he says, I don't normally agree with these people much, but on this one, Stephen Moore's right. And everyone needs to read the report at openthebooks.com. And that's how bad it is in the nation. Bill Maher can agree with David Stockman and Stephen Moore on the policy that we run out. It's not about right and wrong. It is about right and wrong. It's not about, oftentimes, D's and R's anymore. Those lines get confused. We did an oversight report on the SBA, the Small Business Administration. They're supposed to lend to mom and pop businesses on Main Street. Here's what we found. We found $250 million flowed from the SBA into subdivisions of the Fortune 100, and that's not right. We found $200 million of lending flowed from the SBA into private country clubs across the country. Golf clubs, swim clubs, beach clubs. We found $124 million flowed into zip code 90210 in Beverly Hills, California. We found $9.2 billion flowed into the most successful investment bankers, equity, capitalist funds across the country, with no transparency on where it flowed after that. And the SBA wasn't designed to be a slush fund for wealthy entities. The SBA was designed to fund the growth of jobs on Main Street for mom and pop businesses. There aren't any hearings on Capitol Hill regarding the SBA. This broke on the front page of the Washington Times. The reporter said, certainly this will lead to congressional hearings, and we're still waiting. We came of age on our transparency model a little over a year ago, and hopefully you and I will never face such a scandal. But unfortunately, the scandal is occurring continuously in real time as we go. And if you remember, that was on the Veterans Affairs.
So let's just go back. So at Phoenix, it was alleged by Dr. Sam Foote that up to 40 veterans died while waiting to see a doctor. And up to 1,700 veterans had to wait 6 months to see a doctor. And so when the secretary at the time of the VA, Eric Shinseki, went in front of Capitol Hill to testify, we had the second lead story on May 15th of 2014 at Fox News. And here was our story. In Phoenix, the epicenter of the scandal, we simply wanted to know, since veterans couldn't get in to see a doctor, first, how many employees did the center have? 3,200 employees. How many doctors? 226. Veterans couldn't get in to see a doctor. There weren't enough doctors. It was an employment farm, not a medical system. 3/4 of the salary spent was outside of direct medical care. Only 1/4 of the salary spent were treating veterans. The #1 bonus at the Phoenix facility was the director, Sharon Hellman, and it was 2 times larger than all other 3,200 employees at the facility. Nobody knew that. The VA shut down answering Freedom of Information Act requests. But our model is proactive capture. We already had the entire salary spend for the entire federal government all the way back to 2007, including all their performance bonuses. But then, as you know, once the scandal died down, nothing really happened. We did the update this year. During the scandal and after, the VA hired another 24,000 employees. So how many were doctors? Less than 2,000. Of the new hires, only less than 1 out of 12 new hires was a doctor, and the veterans couldn't get in to see doctors. The wait lines are still at all-time highs. Only about 8 people have been fired. Sharon Hellman's bonus was rescinded. She sued in court. She got it back. The VA lawyers botched that one, and they only finally fired her because they found she illegally accepted gifts from her lobbyist boyfriend. We just came out with our latest oversight report on the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And I had to be convinced to do this report. I thought, certainly on the center right, because the EPA has been such a thorn, because the EPA has challenged private property rights from sea to shining sea, I was under the misimpression that everything to know about the EPA had already been aired. But as soon as I started looking at our data, I realized we hardly knew anything about the EPA. And I am really proud of our work on this oversight report. So I think, first of all, our report puts into context the size and the scope and the power of this federal agency. So if the EPA was a state ranked on annual budget, where would it rank out of the 50 states? Well, in the last 4 years, it would rank as high as 38th, and right now it would rank 42nd. So what you are talking about is a powerful agency with a massive annual budget that rivals the states. There are 1,020 lawyers, according to our salary database, that work at the EPA. And so I took that number. I wanted to find out if you rank the EPA lawyers versus the largest private law firms in the country, where would the EPA rank? So in the past 4 years, it would rank as high as 11, and currently it would rank 14th largest law firm in the United States. We found $72 billion of grant making from the EPA just since the year 2000. It's been around since the 70s. So I wanted to know, where would it rank against the largest private foundations in the country? Well, the Bill and Melinda Gates is the largest private foundation in the world. And over the course of the last just 6 years, they've given about $3 billion worth of grants. The EPA has given about 20 times as many grants than the largest private foundation. I wanted to know what kind of scope the EPA had to incentivize their workforce. We found 7 out of every 10 employees at the EPA, and there's a little over 15,000 of them, make over $100,000 per year. 1/3 of their workforce makes over $125,000 a year. But it's not enough. They handed out, just since 2007, $144 million in performance bonuses on top of those lavish salaries. And then we found that the EPA, talk about lavish lifestyles, the compensation wasn't enough. They had to sit in the easy chair. We found $92 million of furniture purchases over the course of the last 10 years, with $50 million of it to upscale merchandise mark Chicago retailer Herman Miller for expensive luxury furniture. And that rocketed to the Bill O'Reilly program at Fox News. That won the Golden Hammer Award for the EPA at the Washington Times. So the Pope was in town, Boehner resigned, and what was the #1 story the entire weekend? Our story on the EPA furniture. I'm proud of it. Next to break was the EPA public relations spin machine. We found $170 million spent since 2007 on the EPA public relations spin machine. So they have 118 public affairs officers that make more than 6 figures. And then they bonused them. But it wasn't enough. They spent $26 million on outside PR consultants. So the Washington Free Beacon, that led their website, and that went to special report with Brett. Yes, thank you. Where I was interviewed. And Stuart Varney's program. And the watchdog.org folks at the Franklin Center for Public Integrity, they just did a nice article. And they got the Republican chairman, Lamar Smith from Texas, on the record. They handed him our report, he read it, and he said he's going to hold hearings on every single aspect of the report. We finally got the EPA to respond to the fact that we found that in their checkbook they spent $10,000 out of an EPA checkbook fund account entitled nuclear bombs. You see, I had a Freedom of Information Act request since July into the EPA. And they keep extending. To this day, they've never responded to my request. But when called out by the media, they said, yes, this was a mistake. I'm not feeling any better at this point, right? This was a mistake. Now, I don't know why it takes an independent third-party organization to point out to the EPA in their own checkbook they're spending money out of a category heading called nuclear bombs. They're also spending money out of a category heading called military chemical weapons. Okay? And they said, well, the nuclear bombs, that was a mistake, and we've since instituted, since 2012, a greater procurement control system, whatever that means. Okay, so here's what we found that really got a lot of press. So this broke in Investors Business Daily by Stephen Moore in an editorial, followed up by the Washington Times with a Drudge link, and back to Fox News. The EPA, since the year 2000, since the year 2006, has spent $750 million on criminal enforcement programs, including millions of dollars on military-style weaponry. And I'm going to read you a list of what they've purchased. For example, and I put this in my Forbes column last week, 2.1 million purchased guns and ammunition up to 300 millimeters. Okay, everyone thinks that's a typo. Here's the breaking news. It's not a typo. A Sherman tank back in the day shot a 30 millimeter round, 700 of them a minute. That'll keep your head down. The EPA has purchased ammo and guns up to 300 millimeters, which is a virtual cannon. It's not a typo. Now, the majority of the 2.1 million was spent on weapons up to 30 millimeters, the former Sherman tank, right? And that was 1.73 million. Other checkbook entries included body armor, camouflage and deceptive equipment, unmanned aircraft, night vision, radar equipment, tactical sets, kits and outfits, transport vehicles, passenger and troop, and up to $6.6 million in joint policing projects with Homeland Security. The EPA also purchased shotgun ammunition, Bushmaster rifles, mobile GPS units, puncture-protected gloves, amphibious assault ships, and much more outlined in our report. Here's one of the things that's outlined in our report. They spent over $300,000 on infrared weapons systems and security systems. They spent $114,000 on offensive and defensive electromagnetic energy weaponry. Okay, like Star Wars. This is your EPA. And they need all of this to protect the environment. So our report has gotten a lot of attention. It's going to get a lot more. The ranking Republican chairman on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, Representative Lamar Smith out of Texas, has promised to hold oversight hearings on every aspect of this report. And we wish him well on that. I just want to close with the following story, then if you guys have time, I'll take some questions. So, Coburn, he fundamentally understands how difficult it is at this moment in time, where we're at in America, to be able to make an impact and make a difference. And he tells the following story. He delivered 3,000 babies back in Oklahoma, in a small town of 5,000 people. Nearly everybody in the small town was at one point, birthed by Dr. Coburn. And he says, oftentimes, just on the law of large numbers, out of 3,000 deliveries, there'll be a delivery that's not going well. There'll be an issue with it. And there's an issue when the baby's heartbeat falls to about 60 beats a minute. And he says at that moment, you have 3 minutes to save the life of that baby. You have to make a decision. You have to take action as a doctor to save that baby. And Coburn says, right now, in real time, this is America's 3-minute moment. And it's our call to each one of us, as we the people, we have to make a decision. We have to take action. And it's America's 3-minute moment. Thanks for having me, and I'm available for your questions.
Do you have a phalanx of bodyguards?
Man, that's exactly what I was going to
I don't, and I think this is an instructive question, because I get it frequently. So, what are you told? After they tell you that your voice and your vote don't matter, and you keep going, right? And you don't believe them, and you don't stop. Then they try to intimidate you. They try to pressure your financial assets. They try to pressure your family. They try to pressure your friends, right? But here's the thing. We're running aggressive reform. We're running aggressive exposure at all levels, whether it's in the college at DuPage, whether it's at the state level, or whether it's at the federal level. And I can tell you, nothing has ever happened to me or my family, nor do I expect it to happen. So that should give all of us the charge. It's bluster. Call their bluff. Run it as hard as you possibly can. And let me tell you, all of the activism at this moment, it's all free. It's free. Because it's going to get worse from here unless you and I are successful. We will lose First Amendment free speech rights. We will lose Second Amendment rights. Everything's on the table. The opponents to liberty are trying to gut it all. So all the activism right now, it's all free. It's a moment. It's the 3-minute moment where we're calm. We got to make that decision. I've made that decision. I made the decision, finally, after the 2012 election. I was going to tell the truth in all circumstances and hold nothing back. And I've been good on that.
How many people work with you?
So we've got a team of 18 now. And
Not enough.
right. So, we, the good people from around the country are starting to find each other. And it's hurting. And we feel we're just getting started. And what we want to do is provide everyone the tools to be able to hold people accountable. So I was in the back, and I was busy, and I was driving, and you're not supposed to be on your phone when you're driving. So I did a little research while Art gave that great introduction, which I really appreciated. It was the best ever. So I took a look at the salary spend in LaSalle County from the year 2000 through 2014, which with a couple clicks on my app, I was able to quantify. So in the year 2000, the salary spent in LaSalle County was about $13 million, and today it's like 24, 26 million, whatever I saw. Okay? So it's doubled. I don't know if your workforce doubled, I doubt it, but if it didn't, if the workforce was the same, and you have a double in salary, that means, divide by 14, that means, everyone got about a 7% pay raise during that time. Well, inflation, it's about 1 to 2%, okay?
I saw a Facebook post today from Open Books.
That's us.
It said the average federal employee was making 78% more than the average private sector employee.
Yeah.
Now, does that include all these people that are making 500,000? I suppose it does, but it's still 78%. That's almost double. So it sounds like it pays to work for the government anymore, not in the private sector.
So on social media, what we would have done with that is our social media coordinator is our senior advisor, John Hart. And who's John Hart? So he co-wrote both of Coburn's award-winning books, The Debt Bomb and the other books that he wrote. He was Coburn's communication director for about 16 years. I didn't see the post today, but I'm sure he linked to somebody else's research on that. So we would, everyone can go to our Facebook page, like it, and check this out.
Yeah.
It's, from what you said, it's been a massive wrongdoing. Who's gonna put the fear in their heart to stop this, to go after them? Who's gonna prosecute it?
Right, so the accountability mechanism across the country is broken, right? So let's just start where we live. There's 102 counties in Illinois. Each one has a state's attorney. I talked about in my speech that our Attorney General, Lisa Madigan, she's not going to prosecute any of the corruption. In fact, I've written 2 pieces for Forbes about her lack of public corruption prosecution. And now if you Google Lisa Madigan, one of those pieces is on page 1 of her Google results. Okay? So I'm proud of that work. So that leaves our 102 state's attorneys. Okay? And they are political creations of the machine that got them into office. And none of the 102 state's attorneys want to prosecute public corruption either. In fact, in DuPage County, the Republican prosecutor Bob Berlin took a pass on enforcing the Open Meetings Act at the College of DuPage. You see, the president, we did the research, it was 140 pages, we put it on his desk, that every time the board conferred a contract totaling up to $4 million of comp over 6 years on the president of COD, every time they did it, they violated the Open Meetings Act. And we asked him to research it, explore it, and prosecute the violations. Lisa Madigan took 4 years, but finally she weighed in on one of them, and she says, yes, they violated the Open Meetings Act. That was key, because what that would have meant was Bruder's contract ran out over the summer. We didn't have to confer, the board didn't have to confer a $750,000 severance bonus. It didn't have to name a building, the Homeland Security building, after Dr. Robert Bruder, right? So all of that was key. If only the local prosecutor, after 50 front-page news stories by the Chicago Tribune and the Daily Herald, after countless editorials, after more ink spilled on the College of DuPage than at any time since the 1970s when James R. Thompson was the Cook County district attorney prosecuting everybody on the left and the right. After all that ink, Bob Berlin, the local prosecutor, took a pass. So it's a problem. How do you clean up Illinois? We have to contest the state's attorney races. And it's not easy. Finding a candidate. They have to be a lawyer. Okay? And the lawyers are all
system. And when you rock the system, you don't make money. So I get it, it's tough, but we need a new generation of leadership, and all of us need to be conscious of the public corruption problem, and it starts with our state's attorneys.
Recently, at a tea party over in Bureau County, we had a lady talking about convention of states. Are you familiar with convention of states? Can we trust it? Is it a good idea?
I talk about what I'm familiar with, and I'm not signed on to the Convention of States. I know Coburn is signed on to the Convention of States with Mark Meckler. I've heard Mark Meckler speak. He sounds convincing, but I'm not prepared to weigh in on either side of that. And I've just chosen to stay, within our swim lane. In our swim lane, we got enough that we're obviously dealing with. Answer those questions. I quite frankly don't.
Are you looking into any further expenditures and wards going with the state of Illinois and with the city of Chicago? It seems like that is our holdup in our budget at the present time. And
right. Okay. So let's talk about this right now. So I think it is absolutely brilliant strategy that Bruce Rauner is running as governor. Let's talk about that. Why do I say that? Because there's supermajorities of Democrats that control the entire legislative making apparatus in the state, lock, stock, and barrel. It's Michael Madigan and John Cullerton. Try as he might, Rauner can't get any legislation through those guys. It's completely up to them. And those two guys, Madigan and Cullerton, have the supermajorities. And what that means is they don't need Rauner either. They can govern from the legislature. And Rauner is saying, you guys have the supermajorities, you guys can govern, but they're unwilling to. They don't want to take their legislation and their ideas into the next election, quite evidently. So Rauner is simply saying, well then this is my agenda. We either do my agenda, or you guys can do your agenda. And they're at loggerheads. Rauner's not going to sign an unbalanced budget. Rauner wants reforms, structural reforms for any tax hike. He wants a property tax freeze followed by cuts, and we all deserve it as our home values fell and our property taxes went up. That wasn't fair. 62% of Democrats would vote for that property tax legislation. Rauner spearheaded it, ran on it, was elected on it, and he wants it. He wants to take on the trial bar, lower workers' compensation costs, make it a better place for businesses to thrive in the state. So he is basically saying, I want my agenda. You guys have the power to run your agenda, but they are unwilling to do their agenda because they know they will lose the next election. Okay, and so that's where we're at. Now, I think there should be some tweaks, and I'm working on this, and we've got the ear of some very powerful people. Leslie Munger and Bruce Rauner should be going line by line through 12 years of Democratic spending, all of those contracts, and they should be squeezing that out. They should be exercising the 30-day exits on bloated contracts. They should be holding a weekly press conference, telling the people of Illinois what they've squeezed out, what they've discovered, and what the Democrats have done to this state. And they're not doing that. And they should be doing it. Because they're starting to lose the narrative. And the Democratic narrative is you're cutting the funding to services. And unfortunately, they participated in some of that. On the payments of developmental disability, Munger was hauled into federal court 3 times and threatened contempt of court. The federal judge had to be pulled off on vacation to get her to pay the bills to the people who have real needs. So they've opened themselves up for a little of that. They need to get religion on spending, on auditing, on squeezing corruption, and get serious on that. Now, I think that they deserve a little bit of a leash, right? They've had a lot on their plate, but now's the time to get to work. And we're here to help them if they want to do that. It's the only way back. It is the only way back. If you're going to hold the line on the loggerheads, you better start auditing. You better start showcasing the waste of this state. Throw a rock and you find corruption at every turn. It's time to squeeze it out.
On one of your earlier topics, you cited some numbers in regard to LaSalle County. I take it that was county government and not all of the governmental employment within the county.
Right.
Okay. It sounded right to me. The county budget is typically around $60, $70 million. Half of that's probably for salaries at least.
You know, I just pulled it up, so 13.1 million of total salary spent in the year 2000, and today it's 24.1 million, so.
Less than I thought. But I'm wondering how you get those numbers. And let me just, the reason why I'm concerned. LaSalle County has had a line item budget until last year. Last year, because of lawsuits against the county, using the budget and the audit as governmental documents and therefore certified for the court, and the county has lost cases. They have stopped doing this, and now the each department simply has a payroll category where as many as 50 to 100 people are amalgamated into one number, say in the sheriff's department or the county nursing home. I believe this is illegal. The ordinary people have no way of getting that information in a proper time to file a tax objection. I'm wondering how you get your information, if it's for each individual job, as used to be done, and is essentially done in the major counties of this state, or is it some other way? I know I could get the information by bringing people into court, but how does the general public get such information? How do you get it?
Yeah, so what we do is we file a Freedom of Information Act request with the pension plan. So we don't even go to the county level. They report every year to the pension plan, of course. So we file our request there and we gather it all.
And that's all for individuals each one?
Yes, so
And
name.
it's listed by department?
Right, so name of the person. So I forget what the granular level of information disclosed by each of the 5 major Illinois pension plans is different. But I think we have title, years of service, and salary.
Also, on the county website, or at least for LaSalle County, I think every county, is required to list the compensation of the top 100 employees. LaSalle County lists every one. It lists the salary, and it lists the health plan benefits.
Good.
It does not list IMRF, and I would like to know that. And so that's something that needs to be changed by the state law. Put that in and require it. The other is, if you look through that list for LaSalle County and go down to our 29 board members, you'll see each one of them starred because they cannot compute their compensation because we are paid on a per diem basis. $60 per meeting, plus mileage, the variable life. And it seems to me that there's a better way of doing that. That we have no idea what our county board members are being paid.
Interesting. Right.
I just want to say, God bless you for all your efforts.
Christine.
I was just going to ask a question. You said what Bronner and Leslie Munger should be doing is explaining to all of us, showing all of us the corruption and waste that's been going on in the last several years. It makes sense to me, probably makes sense to everybody in this room. I'm not a legislator, I don't have a law degree. But why are they not doing that? I don't understand why they would take that approach. What would keep them from, I mean, has anybody asked for reasoning? I mean, their approach, that approach makes so much sense. Show us, if we see the truth, we'll see the spending is there and that the Democrats have been doing this for so long and.
Right, so hey, look, I have the same question, and hopefully we will see movement in that regard. I mean, tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars hanging in the balance. So why haven't we seen it? Let's just imagine right now they're only 10 months into office, and they've had a lot of things to do, including a massive budget battle, because they haven't gotten around to it yet. And hopefully they're now getting around to it.
But
And
look
we're here
what
to help.
But look what you do with 18 people on your staff. And we are paying all the people that they have hired to do jobs and to go through and manage. So it's not like Leslie Munger and Bruce Rauner are just doing that. They hire hundreds of people to do this. And that's why I just don't understand, I don't get it.
Right, Leslie Munger has a staff of about 300.
I think one of the aspects that we have to look at, and that's Mr. Madigan. He's got so much power. He hires a lot of people, and you and I both know, like Cook County, he puts the judges in, he puts almost every elected official in Cook County in office through his democratic control, quote, rule.
Right.
And to overcome that is, it's a milestone.
It is, right. I mean, it is a Herculean task.
Yes, it
And
is.
we should, I mean, I think we should give respect and deference, but I also think that, let's go back to what I said, what we were all thinking when Rauner beat Quinn. Rauner had to beat Quinn. Who thought it would take $66 million to punch through and break the one-party control in this state? The only guy in the state that could have done it probably was Bruce Rauner. Okay? Now, I said at the time, he will be a great governor if we help him, we stay in there, and if we help him be great, and all of us, we're all in. We want to stay in Illinois. We want him to be great. And I said he'll be a terrible governor if he doesn't listen to us or if we quit helping him. And so he needs our help right now. They need to start auditing. We're here to help. They need to start squeezing out waste. If they're going to hike our taxes, they're going to hike our taxes less if we eliminate waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse, which conservatively is 20% of the state budget, which just happens to be a little over $6 billion. And that right now is the unpaid bills balance. And I don't think those numbers are in dispute. When I ran in 2010, I specifically outlined $10 billion worth of cuts. Here's a simple thing they can do tomorrow. The legislation's already on the books. Michael Connolly, out of a while, passed this back in the year 2011. It's one of the ideas of my campaign. Passed the General Assembly unanimously. They've never done it, not one single time. It's a reverse auction. The legislation was passed. They can. It doesn't say shall, they say may. Central Management Services may use a reverse auction to bid down online amongst qualified bidders in the sunshine the price of procured goods and services by the state of Illinois. You throw those things up on the bloated state contracts from the Democratic years, you will probably save much more than 20%. And CMS, Central Management Services, bids out everything for our university system. They bid out everything at the state level. It's about $8 billion worth of services they bill out. There's $1.5 billion right there you can save through competitive procurement using the latest of technology, what the private sector uses every single day to cut costs. They should use it. We should help them. Everybody should go on their Facebook page tonight and say, I want to see a reverse auction before I pay another dime's worth of tax increase.
Adam, you've probably done more Freedom of Information Act requests against government than probably anybody ever has. I have personally, and you know this, have been in a 1.5-year-long FOIA fight with the Bureau of Prisons related to documents concerning Thompson Prison. And you've had your fights, notably with Judy Bartopinka. You're planning to sue the state of California. Is there anything we can do to federal and specifically the state of Illinois Freedom of Information Act laws to make them better, to make the documents come out faster, to provide a punishment provision if the government delays, stonewalls, lies?
And the answer to that is yes. Okay, so at the federal level, we need immediate legislation to open up the federal pensions. So a quick story. We filed with the Office of Personnel Management in Washington, D.C. a request for every single currently employed federal salary since the year 2007. And we got 2.5 million records of employees with 7-year salary and bonus histories. So it was sitting there when the VA scandal broke. We had the data. Well, immediately, once they produced that record, we asked them for the federal pensions. And immediately they wrote back, this request is rejected. Clearly, this is an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy, which we vehemently disagree with. Look, Illinois is corrupt, but at least we can see the pension, the public pensions, at every level. Why is this important? Because if you remember Governor Quinn's chief of staff, she sent a political email. She was retired early, and then Jack Roser's pension guy caught her getting $10,000 a month extra than what she should have been getting. Why is it important? Because the #1 post I ever wrote at Forbes, 61,000 unique views, outed the 2 pension bosses who substitute taught for 1 day in the Springfield Public Schools. The Tribune outed them, that was their story, and I did the follow-up a year later. Despite a law designed to stop them. You know, as soon as the Tribune outed them, the legislature went into session, into special session, they passed the law, Quinn signed it, he says it was egregious, we stopped them, this will never happen again. And then 6 months, 8 months later, I found in our data, I couldn't believe my eyes, their names. They got their $1 million worth of pension, teacher pension, after substitute teaching for 1 day. That's why we need pension transparency at the federal level. The pensions, literally, at the federal level, are calculated in a mountain in Pennsylvania, no windows, manual, out-of-file cabinets, literally no sunlight, no transparency. And wouldn't you like to know Louis Lerner's pension? So AEI, one of the top think tanks on the center right since the 1920s, Heritage and Cato all weighed in on what her pension would be, and they were off by a factor of 50,000 on their estimates. We have no idea how these things are being calculated or what people are being paid, and corruption hides in the dark corners. We need to break open those federal pensions.
Yes.
So that's one thing at the federal level. You know, the State Freedom of Information Act law, as it stands right now, as corrupt as this state is, you know, we file requests in all 50 states, and the Illinois law is pretty good. I don't have too many beefs with the Illinois law. The penalties could increase, but I'm afraid to suggest any more legislation on the Freedom of Information Act law, and I'll tell you why. There's a commission right now looking at unfunded mandates at the local level. And the commission has determined that Freedom of Information Act requests are costing municipalities too much. You, pesky citizen, are the problem. You're filing too many requests, and it is taking too much expense. They're saying that this is an unfunded mandate by the legislature, and they are suggesting that your rights to your information, public information, be curtailed. So I would just rather in Illinois leave the law the way it is right now.
Couldn't all that be put on a website?
Yes.
And then it would cost, like, how much? Well, if the White House did it, it would